Great. Thank you all for coming tonight to the first community meeting related to the PES Refinery Advisory Group. First, I have a couple housekeeping items, and we'll do a quick round of introductions and get right into a short presentation about why we're here and kind of what our next steps are. First, I want to recognize and thank the staff of Prep Charter School for hosting the meeting. I do want to note that there are Spanish interpretation services that are available. If anyone needs interpretation services, please see Orlando Almonte, who is over there waving his hand. At the end of the meeting, there will be an opportunity for members of the audience to make comments. People who signed up in advance, I already have I have that list. If you haven't signed up yet and would like to speak, the sign up is at the end of this table, or you can certainly see Chris Roop or Javon Davis. I'm going to quickly start with a round of introductions. My name is Brian Abernathy. I'm the city's managing director and co-chair of this committee. Why don't we start at the end with Ann? Is there anybody else? Yeah.
I'm Ann Fadula, and I'm Director of Planning and Development for the City of Philadelphia.
Ed Hazuri with my own company. I've been involved with energy in the Delaware Valley for about 35 years.
I'm Mark Lynch with IBW Local 98.
Irene Russell, President, Friends of Stinger Square.
Tom Farley, Commissioner of Health for Philadelphia.
Adam Teal, I'm the Fire Commissioner and Emergency Management Director.
Rich Laser, Deputy Mayor for Labor in the Mayor's Office.
Ryan O'Callahan, Steelworkers, Local 10-1.
Jenny Delaguarda, Florida State Area residents, and a member of the Refinery Community Advisory Panel.
Sean Jelasinski, the Executive Director of the Sports Complex Special Services District.
Anna Schiff, Executive Director of the Sustainable Business Network of Greater Philadelphia.
Otis Bullock, Executive Director of Diversified Community Services.
Peter Carlo, Air Quality Scientist.
Pat Patterson, Regional Director of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection.
Great. I want to start off by just explaining a little bit about what the advisory group is and what we're hoping to accomplish. Our purpose is to help the city convene a wide array of stakeholders with multiple different perspectives to provide some advice, exactly what it says, to the city on the refinery. The advisory group itself is not going to be making policy or decisions. Instead, the people on the advisory group are tasked with convening stakeholders to present information to the city. Many of the people on this group do not agree with each other on many issues, and that was very deliberate. And we want to make sure that these members can tap into the networks and bring a wide array of perspectives and opinions to the table. The goal of this process is to gather information and perspectives and to listen to them. We all know that all of you have a story to tell, and we want to hear that story. And the intent is to make sure that we provide an outlet to hear your voice, to hear your concerns, to hear what you would like to see happen in the future, and hear how you've been impacted in the past. Activist groups and politicians are not on the advisory group because we want those people to present those views to the group. We want them to be a part of the process by telling city officials what we want and need to know and what we need to think about. This is the first initial kickoff meeting, but there are 4 more scheduled. The next 4 will be designed to get feedback from specific constituencies, members of the community, members of organized labor, and academic and environmental experts, as well as the business community. We want to make sure we have a process where all sides have an opportunity to be heard, and the city will issue a final report sometime this fall. And again, I do want to reiterate, whether you're on this advisory group or not, we want to make sure that you're heard. The purpose of the advisory group is to make sure that these stakeholders are organized, that they are able to present information in a way and really coordinate these various stakeholders. There's no intent to try and make sure that someone is not heard. And if we need to have more meetings than what are actually already scheduled, we're certainly willing to schedule those. Because again, the purpose of this advisory group is to provide information to the city, information that we need to hear, need to see, and need to understand. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Pat O'Neill with our law department to go through a quick presentation.
Thank
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name's Patrick O'Neill. I'm the city's environmental counsel. I've been with the city for 32 years and probably spent 30 of those years working on various refinery issues. So that's why they sort of picked me to make this short presentation so that we kind of all begin fairly close to the same place, although lots of people know a lot more and some people may not know much of anything, but we'll just see what we can lay out for you this evening. So the agenda for this presentation is I'm going to do a little more talking about the advisory group, just an overview, talk a little bit about the refinery history, and then talk a little bit about the incident, just again, a broad overview of that and some updates related to that. Then we're going to talk about the site, what we know about it, its pluses and its minuses, and what we don't. Talk a little bit about the city's authority that might be able to affect this process. Quite frankly, that's very limited. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about the advisory committee structure. All right. So the advisory group, as Brian was just saying, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we're here to try and collect and share data, not so much, we're not here trying to tell you anything about what should happen or what the information is. We're looking for more data to collect about the potential, what's going to happen with the potential closure of the site, what the effects might be on the economy, the environment, and health. We're looking to collect information regarding the potential reactivation or reuse of that site without any prejudgment about what that might be, but looking at the obstacles and the limitations and the role of the city in that process. We're also going to be looking for what the uses of the site might be and what's economically feasible, what's not, and what might be the most positive thing for the city. The organization of the group is a committee structure. As Brian said, there are 4 committees that you'll be hearing about more in the future. The committee has been chaired by the Managing Director, Brian Abernathy, who you just heard from, and by Fire Commissioner Adam Teal. This is the very worst picture we could find of Brian. I don't know why they chose that, but that is what they used. The Commissioner, he gets a great picture. I also want to tell you the Commissioner, in addition to being Fire Commissioner, he's the Director of Emergency Management. He's an expert in emergency management and hazard control. He's definitely the man for the job. These are the advisory group members. Let me just tell you, you probably can't read that from where you are. This presentation is going to be posted on a website we've created so that you'll be able to look at it and go through the list, see where people are from, what they might be representing. The overall goal here is to provide a way to make sure that city officials know as much as possible about the site and from as many different points of view as possible. They want to make sure that the concerned residents, that's you and the other people that live here, and that those interests have an opportunity to be heard, and that we share those with the mayor, and that they're shared with the whole community. All right, the refinery history. Your slide here on your left is mostly a historical slide. It shows you that the history here is long, over 150 years. You can see these little red dots. You'll see it better if you download the presentation, but suffice to say, at one point there were multiple refineries along the Schuylkill. There continue to be multiple refineries along the Delaware. This has been going on for a long time. The Philadelphia, the PES site has been running for well over 150 years. That has consequences. On your right, you see what is currently the Philadelphia Energy Solutions site. It is broken up. It is actually multiple sites. There's the Girard Point and Point Breeze facilities. They effectively are actually 2 separate refineries. But in addition to that, there's a lot of infrastructure here. There are pipelines. There's to the left there, you'll see there's a tank farm and other facilities that support that entire facility. At the bottom, you can't make it out, I'm sure, but there's actually a rail facility that was built specially to load and unload petroleum products. So a little more about the history. 1866, Atlantic Petroleum Company actually built the first facility at the Point Breeze facility. Initially, it was just storing petroleum products, primarily kerosene for oil lamps. This is long before people had cars or anything of that nature. They started with 4 warehouses and were storing upwards of 50,000 barrels or 2.1 million gallons of product at the time. At that time, they installed docks and railroad lines that connected them to western Pennsylvania and eventually provided the opportunity for export. 1870, the petroleum refining units were actually installed, and they began actually refining material at the site. The name was changed to the Atlantic Refining Company. As time went along, by 1891, 50% of the world's lighting fuel was actually coming from this facility, and 35% of all the U.S. petroleum exports came from the Point Breeze facility. So it was huge, and it stayed huge. By 1915, that's when at that point they were producing gasoline for motor vehicles, obviously the beginning of the motor car in the United States. By 1918, with the advent of World War I, they were producing aviation fuel. Let me just say one thing about this. When these refineries began, they were very dirty. They burned a lot of coal, and the method of storage, once they had large quantities of the material, was to put it in what were unlined tanks. It wasn't that they had evil intent. It was simply that that's the way it was done. The material wasn't considered very expensive. They basically filled it up until the soil was saturated, and that's the origin of a lot of the problems that exist today. So in any event, by 1920, Gulf Oil came, and they built a terminal at Girard Point. By 1928, they were refining 31,000 barrels of material at the site. And by World War II, both the refineries were processing a combined 69,000 barrels, 2.9 million gallons a day. 1966, Atlantic Refining actually merged with Richfield Oil Company and created ARCO. I'm sure you've seen their gas stations at one point or another. There were some other transactions here. I'm not going to go into all of them. One of the larger one was 1982. Gulf Oil was bought by Chevron, and they took over the Girard Point facility. I think most important for our purposes, Sunoco came in and they purchased the Point Breeze facility in 1988, and they purchased the Girard Point facility in 1994. And by 1995, they had basically tried to combine the two refineries to make one large refinery, and basically made the largest refinery on the East Coast, which it still is. By 2012, Sunoco, however, was in trouble. The refining operations were apparently not producing enough profit. At some point, they had 6 or 7 refineries around the country, and they had one in Ohio, they had one in Puerto Rico, several other states. But in 2012, Sunoco basically had gotten rid of all but 2 of its refineries. The one was Philadelphia, the other was in Marcus Hook. Marcus Hook just closed outright. The Philadelphia refinery, they managed to save. A number of different institutions came together to save those jobs, and PES took over. PES had a pretty good run, and we'll go in a little bit to that problem later, but the other thing that happened in 2012 was Sunoco, as part of that whole process of turning over the facility at PES, Sunoco entered into a consent order and agreement with the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection to enter a voluntary cleanup program. It's generally referred to as Act 2. It's actually part of what the Pennsylvania Industrial Sites Reuse Act. That's going to be important later on. As I said, it's a voluntary cleanup. The site owner gets to choose the type of cleanup that they're going to do based on the future use of the site. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the incident, the accident that occurred on June 21st. There was a fire, as you know. It caused an enormous explosion at the Girard Point facility. Pretty much before it had gone very far, the mayor had already made a decision that something had to be done, and he directed the managing director and the fire commissioner to convene an advisory group to start looking into it. At the same time, because of the nature of the accident, a host of federal and state agencies began to investigate and are still investigating the matter. It included the ATF, OSHA, EPA, CSB, which is the Chemical Safety Board, Pennsylvania DEP, and several city agencies, including the fire department, the police department, and air management services. There's ongoing air monitoring, just so you know that, by EPA, by the fire department, and by the health department. The fire department and the Office of Emergency Management, they have been on site and following this matter 24/7. And I think they intend to do that until the matter is completely resolved. On the 26th, PES announced that they were going to close the refinery. That had some consequence because the mayor changed the direction of what we thought this advisory group was going to do, from one of sort of an investigation of the incident and trying to figure out ways to make the refinery safer, to figuring out, well, what do we do going forward if this facility is closed? And then rather quickly, PES filed for bankruptcy. That's also important because that affects what they can do and what we can do going forward. And then what happened at the beginning of August, I believe this is basically done at this point, there was still some crude oil in the Point Breeze facility. That material was, they processed that material and basically have finished turning it into the various products, and that's going to be taken off site. It's all part of winding the facility down and getting this facility ready to mothball it pending. PES hopes for a sale. We'll see if that happens. So the refinery site, this is where a lot of our issues are going to come from. There are advantages and disadvantages to that site. It's massive. It's over 1,300 acres, maybe close to 1,400 acres. It is also what's known as 1,000 acres of it are part of a Keystone Opportunity Zone. That's an advantage because it has certain tax advantages that have been used by PES. It would be applicable to a new user at least up through 2023. The site's already an important part of the economy locally and part of the petroleum industry. As an aside, obviously it supports thousands and thousands of jobs, and the people in those jobs are highly skilled. So there's a highly skilled, well-paid workforce that supports families that's available. The site's close to Center City, has excellent, highly specialized infrastructure, that being the tank farm, the pipelines, their connections to utilities, heavy-duty connections to utilities, local roads, the railroad, highway access. It's close to the port, it's close to the airport, and it has its own direct waterfront access on the Schuylkill. Basically, it's right that sort of economic transportation hub that you want to have for a major facility of some type. All right, so disadvantages. Well, as I've mentioned, the early way the refineries were operated have resulted in extensive soil and groundwater pollution from its long history. Much of that occurred prior to there even being environmental laws, let alone knowing better about what to do with it. Sunoco maintained, the Sunoco company, again, let's be clear, Sunoco, which is still in existence, they maintain responsibility for cleanup at the site. That will likely create some complications. They have chosen a cleanup standard for future use either as a refinery or some other similar heavy industrial use. If it was to be reopened as a refinery, it's likely it would remain one of the, well, it would probably be the largest fixed source of air pollution in the city. I just want to say, one thing I want to say about that is, that type of air pollution, while it might seem counterintuitive, is in fact not illegal. What we do is we permit it, and we require it to be controlled in the best and strongest way possible. But that's true of water pollution and a number of other things where, we regulate it. It's not simply illegal, which I know at first blush you kind of think, well, why wouldn't it be illegal? All right, it's also, the site is going to be subject to climate change issues. It's right along the river. It's basically at sea level and likely to be subject, in fact, the modeling that's been done by the city shows that it's in the future likely to be at a high risk for flooding. In addition, and last but not least on my list, quite importantly, it's now right in the middle of a residential area. It didn't start that way. The refinery was there first, but you can't avoid the fact that now all those residents are there. So whatever the future use is, we'll have to account for that. There are additional uncertainties. There's existing pollution at the site, and we're not sure, what type of limits that will create for future uses. The Act 2 cleanup, as I said, has already been, the organizational parts of that have begun, and the studies have begun. It is based on future use as a refinery or a similarly heavy-duty industrial use that potentially limits future uses of the property. It doesn't mean somebody else can't do more cleanup, but it is a limiting factor. The broader economic uncertainty there's broader economic uncertainty that exists with regard to any refinery. The amount of gasoline we're using in the country has pretty much leveled out. It may be going down. We have cleaner cars. We're using cars that are electric. There's the whole issue about global climate change. All those things are impacting the refinery industry, not to mention competition from actually other countries where it used to be that only crude oil was imported. Now there are refineries that have been built in Asia and Africa, and they actually import to us refined products. In addition to that, there's competition from the Midwest, and of course, I'm sure you're aware of Louisiana and Texas. So then, with the bankruptcy in play, we don't really know exactly what PES will do. Will it sell the refinery? Might it try to come back out of bankruptcy, which it did once last year? Will they dismantle the existing facility for some purpose, whether to sell those pieces or some other reason we don't know? All that affects what they might try to redevelop the site for their own purposes. Regardless of the future use, how can the site be made safer and cleaner in the future? That's going to be part of what we're going to be looking at. All right, so the city's authority, as I said, it's very limited. The primary issue that everybody really has to remember here is the site is privately owned. Just like you have your homes or your property, as much as it seems like the government may interfere with it at times, the fact is we cannot necessarily order them to do something or build something. We can limit, we can control, but for example, zoning, this has been here prior to zoning, and even the zoning that was placed on this property is for heavy industrial. Even if you were to try and rezone it against the property owner's desire, they basically get grandfathered for their existing use. We have certain control over building and property maintenance. There's the fire code, of course. We also have some control. We have some delegation from the federal government for air pollution and clean water requirements, but that's mostly about limiting what's happening at a site. It may offer some leverage, but not much control, to pick a use. The city's we've entered our appearance in the bankruptcy process, so we can play a role there, but again, that's pretty limited. We'll certainly be communicating to the judge sort of what our desires, and we're keeping track of what PES is doing in that process, but we don't have very much power there. Oddly enough, if they owed us hundreds of millions of dollars, which they do not, then we would be one of their debtors, and we might have some authority that way, but that's not us. That would be the banks. All right. So we've talked about the city's authority, what PES does, whether they can build or reopen, what if it's sold to a different refinery, what if they choose some different activities at the site, all that, what's the feasibility of that? We're going to be looking at that. So a little bit more about the advisory group. We're here to engage. We're here to try and help organize the process. We're here to collect information for the most part, not to come to you as experts and tell you how everything's going to be done. I'm just going to reiterate what Brian said. There are 4 committees or subcommittees. One of them is concentrating on the community, one is on labor, one is on environmental or environmental academic, and the other is on business. Each committee has already organized at least one public meeting. That's a minimum, not a maximum. The work of the advisory committee will be compiled in the end in a report. That report will be made available to you and to the mayor. This is a list of the upcoming meetings. You'll be able to get that. Again, you can get that on site, but the community meeting is Tuesday, August 20th. The labor meeting is Wednesday, August 21st. The academic environmental meeting is Tuesday, August 27th, and the business meeting is Monday, September 9th. They're all at 5:30, and they're all at this facility. We tried to find a place, again, that was in the community and that was as easily accessible to folks as was possible. Obviously, there are limits on that, but this is what we found. In addition to that, we've created a website at www.phila.gov/refinery where this information will be posted. We absolutely want to hear from you. We're having these public meetings for you to give us your input, but you can also email refinery@phila.gov to give us information, to give us your comments. We're also going to ask you, in order to try and have these committee meetings to be as orderly as possible, we're going to ask that if it's at all possible, you let us know that you're coming to a meeting, and as you did here tonight, sign up to come and present. You don't have to do that. If you didn't sign up, you're absolutely welcome. You'll get your 3 minutes to present no matter what, but it will make things probably move a little easier if we know in advance. You're also welcome to give us written comments, and I would highly encourage you to do that. That gives you a much greater chance to give a larger number of comments, more sophisticated, and doesn't limit you by that 3-minute time period. But you can do both, and I encourage you to do that. All right, for updates, you'll be able to look again at the website, and if you want to send us questions or comments, you can email us at refinery@phila.gov. Again, you'll be able to get this information at the website. So, public comment is now. I think I'll just read through this. We're going to ask you, if you can, those of you who signed up, I think probably should have first chance at the microphone, but if you'll line up at the microphone, we'll begin taking comment. If you'll limit your comments, we're asking you to concentrate, if possible tonight, on the process and on the nature of the committee. There are going to be topical committee meetings that are coming up, but we will take any comment that you give us tonight. It is necessary to limit you to 3 minutes, just because if everybody speaks, we could be here all night. Remember, we want to hear your voice, and the last thing I'll just say is, we hopefully you'll be respectful to each other and to each other's chance to speak. And thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Pat. And before folks line up, I am going to go through the list of folks who signed up online, so we can give them an opportunity to speak first. I also want to mention that there is a survey that you can also fill out if you want to ask a question, make a comment, but don't want to speak. You can fill out that survey, pass it to the end. You can certainly pass it in after the meeting on your way out at the door. We will answer all of those questions online and hopefully before the next public meeting, which I believe is August 20th. Likewise, if you have questions at the microphone tonight, we aren't planning to respond. We will, again, be responding in writing online, and that really is just a time management issue. Again, we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak, everybody has an opportunity to provide questions as we go forward. As Pat said, please do your best to limit the conversation to topics covered tonight. For example, the structure of the upcoming meetings, what you think could be useful topics you would like to see explored in this process would also be extremely helpful. Questions you would like to have answered, etc. This is, and I think the most important piece to remember, this is not your only opportunity to be heard. There are a number of public meetings that are coming up. There are also opportunities to post questions and comments online, as well as provide things in writing. So this is not the only chance you're going to have to make sure that your voice is heard. And then as we start, I do want to provide State Senator Anthony Williams an opportunity to address us first.
Thank you for the opportunity. And Mr. Abernathy, I thank you for organizing this so quickly. For those who are participating, we thank you for your time and your service. And for the audience who's here tonight, I greatly appreciate you all being in attendance. For those who don't know, my name is Anthony Hardy Wims. I represent the 8th Senatorial District, of which this refinery falls into, and we've been dealing with for many, many generations. Tonight, I'm going to limit my comments to what people should, in my opinion, be most concerned about, and that is the health and welfare of people who work there as well as people who live here. That means the air and the water. And to the extent that the state has a responsibility and we coordinate with the city, I want to make sure that that's not done in a disconnected way but a seamless way. So I come in, as they would say, peace to work in a cooperative way. There are things that are obvious, I think, to everyone who is here tonight. If they're not, there's about 30,000 plus gallons of hydrofluoric acid which still remains there, which is particularly of concern to all of us because obviously it is one of the most corrosive chemicals that any human being can be around. It's still there, and the fact that the place is now not necessarily operating the way that we would normally want it to operate, I think that heightens all of our concerns, especially those of us who live in this area, and we would love to work cooperatively to find out what specifically is going to happen because when bankruptcies occur and assets are sold off and things like that, there can be a delay in that process, which would be obvious to all of us. And most importantly, we obviously should be commending the first responders on that evening who made sure that that deadly acid was not a contaminant that went into not just the neighborhood, but frankly went to New Jersey. So for those things, I want to make sure that we are a part of it. And then there'll be comments made about the monitoring system and a variety of other things. To the extent that the state has some responsibility to support you financially in that area, because if there's any question, we obviously should do something about it. That should not be a point of contention with any of us. So those two things, I want to make sure we're clear about: the removing of the acid and also dealing with the monitoring system. To the extent that I have opinion about a variety of other things, of course I always do, but that's not tonight. That's for the public. But I want to make sure that the public knows that we are here from the state level. We're committed to working with them and working with you in a collaborative way to make sure that people feel safe, that the air is clean, and that the water is clean as well. So thank you very much for organizing this tonight.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to do my best to go through the list of those who signed up in order that they signed up. So the first speaker is Mark Clincy. Yeah, he's got it. Yeah, I was about to do this.
Thank you to the people that organized this public forum. Thank you for allowing me to be here. My name is Mark Clincy. I am a member of Philly Thrive and a resident of South Philadelphia. I am going to keep this brief because there's a lot to be said, but I'm not going to try to say all of it. Philly Thrive is an organization that has fought for the right to breathe clean air. And for the past 4 years, we've been focused on the Philadelphia Energy Solutions Refinery, the largest polluter in the city many times over. I and others in this room have PES as a neighbor, have lived the pollution daily, and we would have been the first to die on June 21st. We are experts. Excuse me a minute. Not a moment too soon to be planning for a future of PES. Philly Thrive has been asking the city to make a plan for years. And because that did not happen, we find ourselves in this situation we are in. Now, I'm not going to go too much further than that right now. But what I am going to say is this. In order for the process to be most successful, the question of how residents are engaged is central. Basically, we want to share concerns and confusions about Philly Thrive's attempts to volunteer to join the advisory group. As organized resident advocates, we were initially excluded and then formally denied a seat. Much to our surprise, we found out through the mayor's press announcement that one of our members was in fact invited to participate. We fully support Ms. Irene Russell as a long-time community leader in Graves Ferry and Philly Thrive member to serve on the advisory group. However, it is unacceptable that residents from the many diverse neighborhoods throughout South, Southwest, and West Philadelphia directly impacted by PES are not represented. We would be happy to support a thoughtful process of adding additional residents who have been leading on solutions in their neighborhood if the relationships are what you are lacking. The advisory group appears to be dominated by government bureaucrats and not reflective in terms of race, class, gender, and age of Philadelphia, and especially populations most impacted by the refinery. Thirdly, we need to know up front how exactly knowledge and recommendations from residents are going to inform decisions the city is making. We will not be fooled into thinking our opinions are being implemented when they are not. If there are areas where the city does not have decision-making power, we need to know what those areas are and who has the power. I thank you for your time today.
Thank you, sir. Great. Our next speaker is Katherine Randall.
I don't have nearly anything as important to follow up with that, but I'm here today because I live 3 blocks from this school. I live 3 blocks from this school, and like Senator Anthony Williams said, I'm extremely concerned about the hydrogen fluoride, not just sitting there, but on a daily basis. I'd like to add to the senator's remarks in 2 ways. First, I believe it was a refinery worker who is responsible for some of the people here being alive today. A refinery worker moved the hydrogen fluoride, a substance that is so toxic. It is rated the same as the substance that killed 3,000 people in the Bhopal incident, a substance that's used to dissolve human flesh. I'm very, very grateful to the refinery workers, and I would hope that this committee, in addition to trying to shape what ends up living at the new site, also shapes what ends up happening day to day at the new site. We all know that hydrogen fluoride isn't actually necessary in the refining process. It's actually just the cheapest, most dangerous thing that can be used to refine. So I'd ask that the committee look into not just who is going to live there, but how they're going to behave and how they're going to make and permit those decisions of profits versus human life. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you. Roman Kravitsky.
Hello, my name is Roman. I'm a school teacher here in Philadelphia. I'm also involved with an amazing group of people. These are warriors, Philly Thrive. And oftentimes we hear the term social justice warriors being thrown out. The fact is that they are warriors, because this is a war. It's been a war of corporations against people for decades. To the point of what can be suggested to make this process, arguably the word we're looking for is democratic, I would say that having a panel of suits and cameras is not always the best way to solicit community feedback. I think if we actually want true community feedback, you do it in small groups. You hire consultants who have been doing community work for a while to tell you what is the best way to solicit the most honest feedback from residents where they don't feel intimidated by the people you see here. In terms of what was presented today, we were told at some point, that the city permits it, that this is not illegal. Well, they've been violating it, right? What do they do with all those fines? That's a question I have. We've been told that what you're saying, what does the city have power over in terms of, well, it's private land. I want to know the history of when the city has taken private land for public use, right? In the Constitution, we talk about eminent domain. When they wanted to build a parkway, they got rid of people's houses and they built a parkway. So give us a history on when the city took over private land for public use, okay? Another point is, honestly, I think this conversation is very simple, all right? In the 70s, oil corporations were doing research. Scientists in Exxon had research, and they said that burning fossil fuels, burning oil, is going to kill the planet. What did they do with that research? They killed it, right? The corporations, the oil corporations and companies knew what they were doing to people, but they buried that under the rug. So we've known for decades what's been happening. The question is, will you have the teeth to put people over profit? And honestly, there's a lot to say. You said this is going to be a report, that it's not a decision that you're making. What I'm curious about, and I think it would be relevant for people to know, that in 2011, the city made this 2035 vision plan. Where is that plan? How does this shape into that plan? They were supposed to update it in 2 years. So where does this advisory council and all this fit into this big, glorious vision of a sustainable future for Philadelphia? Where does that fit into it? Lastly, I'll say this. There's a Greek saying that I start my classes off with, and I want to leave it with everyone here, especially in the people in the room who are making decisions, because we're leaving these decisions for the future. The saying goes like this: a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they will never sit. Okay? So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Minal Raval. I apologize if I mispronounced that. Minal Raval.
Hi, my name's Minal Raval. I live in Mount Airy, about 10 miles north of here. We're thankful there were no casualties from the 6/21 incident at the refinery. We're also thankful this refinery has closed. We need to ensure that it remains closed and focus on the task at hand, which is to reclaim the land for other applications. Decline call. Ones that don't involve fossil fuels, in line with our city's climate action goals, because we all have a right to breathe. Remembering our city's zero waste by 2035 goal, though, and knowing that there's no a way to take the contaminated soil to, we need to clean the soil in place. But when we look at flood maps, for instance, choices.climatecentral.com, most of the refinery land could be submerged given the rate and direction we're headed with the climate crisis. So we recommend cleaning it up as best as we can before this happens to recreate the marshland and green space we've lost where the Schuylkill and Delaware rivers meet. Most people would not hesitate to support a complete Schuylkill River Trail. How? In one word, mycoremediation, or remediating using the mycelium network of mushrooms. Mycoremediation works in two ways, pulling up elementals and breaking down compounds. Elementals like lead are pulled up and into the mushroom fruit, which can be harvested, dehydrated, and incinerated, with the resultant ash treated as hazardous waste. Compounds like petrochemicals formed from hydrocarbons actually feed the mycelium network, which break the hydrocarbons down into innocuous elements like hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen, and help the mushroom fruit thrive. If no heavy metals are found in the soil, the mushrooms from a petrochemical site could be harvested and added to the compost pile for future soil enhancement. Our understanding is that multiple crops and harvest can pull up the heavy metals, break down the hydrocarbons, and leave us with living, fertile soil. I was told about 3 growing cycles, all of which could take place in a year, would be enough to remediate the soil. I've also learned that mycoremediation is best done with mycelium from spent substrate from a mushroom farm. We got lots of those here in Southeast PA. And that mycoremediation is cheaper than any other form of remediation. Most people I've spoken with suggest some form of renewable energy at the site, such as geothermal fields and solar farms. After soil reclamation, I sense that a pollinator-friendly solar farm would be very popular, allowing for local food production in this area also. With our region being the mushroom capital of the U.S., this could be a great Philadelphia story. Land reclamation, green space, clean energy, local food. These are the types of jobs people would clamor over. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Martin Willis. Martin Willis. Great, thanks.
My name is Martin Willis. I'm a contract union boilermaker. For the past 25 years, I've been working in and out of that refinery. I live in Delaware. I traveled almost 35 miles to come here tonight because the economic benefits of that refinery don't just pertain to the city of Philadelphia, but throughout the whole Tri-State Valley, whole Delaware Valley. The economic benefits of that refinery are too numerous to account for. For the past 25 years, I've done numerous things inside that refinery as a boilermaker. I worked in the affected plant, the 433 unit, on a 2010 turnaround. When we have turnarounds at that refinery, we can have up to 1,000 to even 2,000 people who work there months at a time. With the closing of this refinery, it will have a drastic effect on the economic availability of people like me working. Right now, I'm on Pennsylvania unemployment. We were going to start a turnaround in the fall of this year on the 870 unit. That would have got me off of unemployment and made me a productive citizen. I literally cannot go forward without this refinery being realized. We have to do everything we can to get this refinery back up and running. What people don't realize is this. Come January 1st, international maritime standards come in effect. We got to take low sulfur diesel. Right now, the law states that 0.35% diesel fuel for international maritime. On January 1st, it has to go down to 0.5. Diesel oil is the same thing as heating oil. If that refinery remains closed, our heating oil is going to spike, just like the gasoline did the day they announced the refinery was closed. I'd like to thank Mr. Abernathy for holding this, and the only question I have is, was anybody from the governor's office invited? Thank you.
Thank you. And I should say I did not reference the governor's office, but they are here as well. Matt Walker.
Hi, my name is Matt Walker, and I'm the Advocacy Director with Clean Air Council. We're a nonprofit organization headquartered in Philadelphia. The Council's been working to protect everyone's right to breathe clean air for over 50 years. Clean Air Council has 37,000 members, including many in Philadelphia. It has been known for some time now that the PES refinery was in financial trouble and was not likely to be viable in the long term. Long before now, the city should have created a group to assess the potential future uses of the refinery site and ensure that plans were in place to adequately support and protect its highly skilled workforce. Over the refinery's century and a half of storing and processing crude oil and petroleum products, it has heavily contaminated the soil and polluted the underlying aquifer. The refinery was the largest stationary source of toxic air pollution in Philadelphia. The permanent closure of the PES refinery represents a major improvement to air quality, public health, and quality of life in Philadelphia, and would remove the city's single largest industrial contributor of greenhouse gases. After decades of toxic industrial pollution, it will take a comprehensive cleanup effort to make the site safe for future use. Unfortunately, Sunoco has denied local residents, city agencies, elected officials, workers, and others the opportunity to provide meaningful input on the remediation plans. The Department of Environmental Protection has quickly approved Sunoco's weak cleanup standards for much of the refinery property. A primary responsibility of this advisory group must be to demand that DEP and the Environmental Protection Agency allow real public input into the remediation plans. In addition to Sunoco's remediation of this legacy contamination, PES will now also be responsible for its own cleanup. We need the same type of oversight on that process as well. Now is Philadelphia's chance to develop a plan that assumes that the future use of about 1,400 acres of waterfront property will no longer be a refinery. The Council appreciates that the City of Philadelphia is engaging area residents and stakeholders in a process to explore best use and highest value of the refinery sites. But the Council recommends that City leadership invites additional representatives to be members of the advisory group. Most importantly, there must be more representation from neighborhood groups adjacent to the refinery site who've been impacted for years. In addition, more environmental groups as well as public health experts should be invited to the group. The Council also believes that the scope of the advisory group's responsibilities should be expanded. The Council recommends that this advisory group hires and oversees a consultant to thoroughly analyze alternative uses of the site with robust public engagement. Determining future uses will be a critical step in ensuring that Sunoco and PES's remediation standards for the refinery parcels are adequate. The study should only consider future uses at this site that do not pollute the air or water, do not negatively affect public health, and do not negatively affect Philadelphia residents' quality of life. The study should assess the contamination levels and current infrastructure of the parcels and determine if there are different future uses possible in different locations. This analysis must identify opportunities for retraining and providing other support to former refinery workers. The city has the power to make decisions about land use through zoning changes. The Council urges this advisory group to make recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council to amend the zoning district of the refinery area to match the highest and best uses of the site identified in the study and your research. This moment presents the greatest opportunity in Philadelphia's history to redefine a future land use for such a large amount of land at one time. We must work together to ensure proper remediation of the site and encourage opportunities for future uses of the site that protect the environment and public health. Thank you.
Audra Wolf.
Hello. My name is Audra Wolf, and I've been a resident of West Philadelphia for 20 years. I'm here tonight speaking on behalf of POWER, which is a multi-faith network based here in Philadelphia with over 80 congregations. Our work joins with partners all across the city in building racial and economic justice on a livable planet. I'm glad to be appearing before the Refinery Advisory Group tonight because this group is convening at a crucial moment in the history of this city. We are in the midst of a climate crisis. What's at stake in the future of the refinery is whether democracy can rein in corporate greed and destruction. We've all benefited from a fossil fuel economy. We've all enjoyed transportation, plastics, and jobs that are connected to cheap energy, But both here in Philadelphia and around the world, these cheap fuels have come at a disastrous cost. According to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, we have only 11 years until 2030 to prevent a catastrophic increase in global temperatures and rising sea levels. And sea levels, I would point out, that could assume the site of the refinery as well. But so in other words, we only have 11 years to mobilize a great turning towards a renewable energy economy. This is a tremendous challenge, but it's also a tremendous opportunity to wrap in people who have been excluded and harmed by the fossil fuel economy. We have an obligation to respond in a way that especially addresses the environmental racism that Black and brown communities and low-income communities have faced for generations. Now, why would you look to the very institutions that have created these problems for advice on how to proceed? I appreciate Mr. Abernathy's comments about how this process will include comments from the public. I genuinely appreciate the good faith gestures to make sure that the public has an opportunity to participate in this. But it is unacceptable that this panel includes so few outside health experts, so few nonprofit leaders and community members. It is outrageous that the advisory group includes more business leaders than people of color. So as the process moves forward, we demand that more space be made for community groups, for health experts, and for others who are committed to a new green economy. Representatives from fence-line communities must have an active say in determining the future of the site. Democracy gives voice to the people. The people in this case are saying loud and clear that we have a right to breathe, and we have a right to good-paying, safe jobs. We have a right to participate in community-driven solutions. We're watching, we're keeping track, and we insist on a transparent, participatory process that holds the fossil fuel giants accountable. So tonight, Power wants to lift up the moral voice of our particular network of churches, masjids, synagogues, and other houses of faith throughout Philadelphia and beyond, in calling for a truly democratic process in shaping the energy and the employment future of Philadelphia. Thank you.
Thank you. Malachi Collins. Malachi Collins. Malachi Collins. All right. Brian Ratcliffe. Mr. Ratcliffe? Great.
Hi, good evening. I have very little to add besides what has already been said. I want to say thank you to everybody who has already spoken and everyone who has shown up tonight. I'm really proud of Philadelphia tonight, and I'm proud of Philly Thrive, and I'm proud of everybody who's had the courage to speak tonight. And thank you, Mr. Abernathy, and the entire council for being here and for hosting this process. I think this is an extremely important conversation. A couple things to just add, or maybe just echo of things that people have already said. I'm a little disheartened to see how few of the panel has come tonight. When you were reading names earlier, it seemed like there were maybe 10 or so people missing. And I think that's unfortunate, especially given that this is sort of the kickoff meeting. It's sort of setting the tone for what these conversations might look like. So I know you're all incredibly busy people. You have lives, and it's hard to get 26 people in the same room at the same time. But hopefully in this scheduling going forward, everyone can be present to sort of signal that each member involved has the same level of commitment. In particular, I'm sad to see that Christine Knapp is not here, because I think that having the voice of the Office of Sustainability is an important presence here. And I would just absolutely like to echo what has already been said regarding the makeup of the panel and how few people of color are involved and how few people from the fence line community are involved. I'm extremely proud and excited to see Miss Irene Russell representing Philly Thrive. And, but she shouldn't be the only one. I also just think that populating the board primarily with individuals with development experience, with emergency management experience, with environmental experience, will potentially bias or skew the conversation to conceptualize this project as being one of primarily economic development or remediation. And it is those things, but the environmental justice component, specifically the fact that the low-income communities of color who have been next to the refinery for generation after generation, and they have been bearing the brunt of not only the air pollution, but the increased risk of explosions and things like that. The fact that that is not centered in the sort of perspectives and biographies of the people on the panel is an oversight, and so I hope that in your conversations you center that going forward. And then I guess the last thing to say is just I'm actually really excited by this process, and I feel very optimistic. I think that this is a really exciting moment. I think this represents a really exciting opportunity for Philadelphia. It's really amazing to see leaders from labor, leaders from the environmental movement, leaders from the business community, like all in one room having one conversation, and it's challenging, and we don't see eye to eye on all these issues, but I do think we all want the same thing, right? We want a livable community with jobs with dignity where people can grow up and raise their families healthily. And I urge you all to be bold and creative in the way that you think about how we might solve these problems. The climate crisis is real. The timing is terrifying. We don't have a lot of time, and I don't think we have time for old-fashioned solutions, right? This is a moment to dream big and to think big about what this might look like, and I think Philadelphia could be the seed of what the green economy looks like. What we do with these 1,400 acres, these prime acres in Philadelphia, like this could be we could show, this could be a template for what the future could look like. And so thank you for your work, thank you for your labor. I'm excited to see where this goes, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Great, thank you. Lisa Hastings. Ms. Hastings?
I will have to say I could say exactly what he said a million times over, but I'll try not to. I'll stick to other things. I know one thing I was disturbed about when this happened was how quickly the shift went from endangering the lives of 1.1 million people to preserving under 1,000 jobs in the city of Philadelphia. It truthfully gave me chills. I strongly oppose the idea of fixing this up and selling this obsolete facility for use as a refinery or for any other role supporting the fossil fuel industry. We need to move on from this. The history of this site does not need to define its future. The primary focus on this site, I believe, should be in removing the lethal compounds, which I hear is undergoing, then closing it permanently for all fossil fuel uses, condemning it if you need to, whatever you have to do, so that it cannot be used for fossil fuel again. Then the process of deconstructing and remediating the site, however long it takes. I learned tonight that this Act 2 uses the future use of the site to determine the cleanup level or something like that. With that being the case, we need to set our sights very high for the refinery site so that our cleanup is not shortchanged. And being realistic, we'll probably need to go beyond Act 2, but we can handle that when it happens. But let's not say, we'll use this for something dirty and then let Sunoco and everyone else not clean it up. I understand that many people, obviously, if they lost their jobs, are very concerned about that. But I heard a lot about how the jobs in the refinery will be replaced at the refinery site. I urge you to look elsewhere within Philadelphia to develop new industrial good jobs, to replace jobs and build more jobs, and let the refinery site be cleaned up and used for another purpose. Finally, in addition to the environment, the other area that's very close to my heart is in public participation for these type of issues. I'm very glad that you've set up public meetings, and I very much hope that they go beyond the typical Philadelphia public meetings. But I'd like to have a few comments on the public participation. The structure of today's meeting in the agenda was on an info section, which was wonderful, followed by comments on controlled subjects. Other subjects will be covered in other meetings. I think I understood that. This is a good start, but I think it's too limited. Instead of talking and listening, consider adopting some meetings where we have a dialogue between people here and you. So when you're discussing something exciting, we can have a good conversation and learn from each other. And several people have mentioned this, but while the working group is a distinguished group, it would benefit greatly from having local, environmental, and community advocates on your group. And it needs to have people who are not constrained by their current associations with academic institutions or the city. That can change things a little bit, and we don't need that in an open process. Second, I'd like you to hold several more open meetings dedicated to Philadelphia residents' concerns. Let the residents take charge of the meeting. Take written and oral comments, and be prepared to answer public questions or arrange to find the answers and provide them to attendees. This is not the same as a venting session. This is a way for people who have ideas to go ahead and tell them to you, ask you questions, and really come to some better decisions than any of us can do by ourselves. Finally, please do more outreach to Philadelphia residents across the city. With a small press release and mostly word of mouth can limit and unintentionally restrict and sometimes warp the public input that you get. The impacts of the refinery are not limited to refinery workers, unions, or immediate neighbors. I live north of the Parkway, but I'm still within that 7-mile region that could have been killed. Please reach out and listen to a broader group of Philadelphians. You may discover ideas that others didn't think of, and you will build up broader public support, which we all need.
Great.
Finally, at public meetings and for submitted ideas, record them, and importantly, think and respond to them. You have one or more ways to contact many people. If you take from your meetings and your ongoing negotiations, develop a responsiveness summary, is what I called mine, which would include a summary of the comments, and then if all of you decide that, hey, this is something we're going to give some more thought to, or whatever your decisions are, send that back to people. Send that, put it on your website, but also send it back to the people that gave you their emails, because it'll keep them connected, and it'll make your lives a lot easier.
Great.
And just basically show the public that we're being listened to, that our ideas are actually being considered, that you're not going to go in a back room and ignore us. And most of all, that the residents of Philadelphia, whether they worked at the refinery, live in this area, or live in Mount Airy, are all respected. Thank you.
Thank you. We have several more speakers, and I do just want to remind folks that if we can keep, I don't want to cut off comments, which I haven't done yet, but I do want to just remind folks to speak for 3 minutes. I appreciate it. And thank you again. Corin Walk.
Hi, I'm Corinne Wolk. I'm a Philadelphia resident, member of EDGE Philly and Physicians for Social Responsibility Philadelphia. And I'll try to keep my remarks short, since I know there's a lot of people you still have to hear from. But speaking of the composition of this committee, it's kind of striking that there's a lack, as far as I know, of anyone who's an expert in environmental remediation. Given that this is an enormous site with, as many have noted, over 150 years of petrochemical pollution on it. And as Christina Simeon on this committee has noted, the remediation plan for this whole area was only to a site-specific standard of continued use as a refinery, not for a park or even potentially a solar farm or anything with public access on it. Additionally, besides kind of the issues of transitioning from what plan we already had to a potential different plan, a lot of the liability is either in the hands of PES, which is now bankrupt and being pursued by an enormous list of creditors, or one of Sunoco or Energy Transfer Partners' sub LLCs, Evergreen Resources. So even if to the existing site-specific standard, I'm really curious where that money will come from, because it seems like PES has not made good on a lot of their obligations financially. So if we're speaking about creating an even cleaner property, is that money going to come from them? Is any money going to come from them? If not, from whom? Taxpayers? And if so, I would hope that there would be even more public input than people have already been demanding and not necessarily gotten. Another issue that some have noted that doesn't seem to be taken into account based on the composition of these committees is the public health aspect of what's already there and continued risks. There are some public health experts on this committee, but for the largest single source of industrial toxic emissions in Philadelphia, largest greenhouse gas emitter in Philadelphia, it's kind of a small proportion, and it's strange that there was room for a lobbyist for the refinery on this committee, but not more than one person whose specialty is in public health and zero remediation experts. And as far as I know, there's been no really serious look at what the health impacts from the refinery have been, partly because a lot of these neighborhoods around the refinery have so many different environmental justice issues that it's hard to single out one specific reason for health issues, or even exactly how different these neighborhoods are in terms of asthma, heart disease, cancer than other parts of Philadelphia. So I would hope that the makers of this committee will look into the finances as they currently stand, how they're going to get money for whatever they plan, and what the health impacts have been and will be from the past of the site and any potential future. Thank you.
Great, thank you. David Steinberg. David Steinberg.
I've got a couple of concerns. I'm a resident of New Jersey, and one of the things that I read in Christina Simone's report on what is called Area of Interest 11 has to do with not the refinery property itself, but the underground aquifers, which is polluting the water that is used for irrigation, and the food that people consume. People may be grown in New Jersey, but a lot of people here in Pennsylvania would eat some of that food as well. So I'm concerned from a public health standpoint concerning that as to what might be done in reference to their cleanups. In addition, another comment I'd like to make, I've heard floating around some ideas about a solar farm, which I come from the solar industry, and I think solar is a great idea for people that are able to have it. But the one concern that strikes me is that in the event that the planes coming in for either taking off or coming in from landings will not want to face a solar farm. So I think that may well be an FAA issue as well before anything is finally decided here. With that, I'm going to say thank you very much for having the opportunity to be able to give the public a chance to be able to share what we have to share.
Great, thank you. Pasquale D'Ambrosio.
Yes, that's me. It's Pasquale D'Ambrosio. Okay, I believe what we're doing here is to stop the pollution of a new facility taking place and to clear up some of the grounds. That's a step in a great direction, in the right direction, but I think we ought to go a little further than that. I think we need a big, once we accomplish that, we need a big patch of grass and green and trees to oxygenate and nitronate the Philadelphia surrounding area. Now, I can give you an example of that. Central Park in the middle of Manhattan. If Central Park did not exist, Manhattan would, and that was all, and Central Park was built up like the surrounding area, Manhattan would be an unbearable place to live. So Central Park is a great thing. What it does, it oxygenates and nitronates all the surrounding area around Manhattan. So when those people there recognize it, they could smell green trees, they could smell nitrogen all the time because of Central Park. I think that's what our aim and that's what our goal should be for that facility. That facility should be acquired either by the city or by the state or feds, or even possibly donated by that company with a big tax deduction for them because they're doing that for the city of Philadelphia. This is not something new. We're not breaking grounds to do something like this for the city. This is being done throughout cities throughout the United States. This is a trend, and also cities throughout the world to make the place, our cities, a more healthier environment to live in. Now, what's the result from having something like this? Just so we breathe fresh air? No, there's also, that's part of it, but we'll have higher test scores in our schools. Instead of having partially asphyxiated students, we have freshly oxygenated and people living in a healthy environment. That would give the students a higher scores. Also, it makes life a little more pleasurable for the workers. It makes the workers more prosperous. We won't be as asphyxiated, as exposed to chemicals, which we are, a lot of us are, in our work environments. So when we go home, we can breathe clean air and cleanse our bodies of those pollutants. Right now, we can't do that. We go outside our house, and we're introducing pollutants into our body. So it makes things even worse, and it makes our prosperity worse. So I think, you know, that's the outcome of this. All right. This is a great opportunity for Philadelphia. I mean great because it's a big landmass, and I think we ought to use some high pressure and serious skills on trying to acquire these lands, because if that's used for other industrial purposes, we're going to lose that opportunity to have that big patch of grass in the middle of our city.
Great.
Okay. Also, as far as economics is concerned, we can.
I am going to ask you just to
What's that?
I'm going to ask you to try and wrap up.
Okay. As far as economics is concerned, we can turn that into boat rentals. We can use it dedicated physical fitness centers. We can turn it into a low-profile wind farm dedicated to an emergency circuit for fire department, police department, hospitals. That would, in case our electricity power grid goes out, we can supply emergency circuit through the city of Philadelphia. That's good. Okay. How are you doing? Okay.
Sir.
Okay.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you so much. John Bland.
Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Committee, thank you. Thanks for everything you're trying to do here. My name's John Bland. I'm the business manager of the Boilermakers, Local 13 out of Philadelphia. Represent a lot of members in Pennsylvania, half the state of Pennsylvania, and also Delaware. I've been a Boilermaker since 1986. I've worked in many refineries, many plants around the country. Falling back to Philly, I started working in Philly in 1986. And I could tell you right now, many plants that I've worked in, Sun Philly probably did more maintenance and upkeep than any other plant that I've seen. I can tell you that right now. And for somebody to make a comment, it's a 150-year-old eyesore. Mostly every unit in that yard was restructured, rebuilt, or renewed. There is very little that is old. The second thing, I was a general foreman for Neuter Construction, I think it was 2008. And Sun Philly at the time, I think, spent over $400 or $500 million upgrades. And that was all for EPA regulation rules. A lot of that money didn't make any money for the plant. We're talking about the scrubbers, everything that they did on your FCC units going forward. And by saying that, I mean, like I said, January, I just had about 175 guys in there. It was $120 million they spent on upgrades, catalyst changeouts, everything else. I was getting ready to put another 200 guys in there, probably starting August, September, ramping up there. This is devastating. I can tell you right now, nobody is going to win if we lose this refinery. And I do respect everybody's position, because I can tell you right now, somebody made the comment that crude products are going down. You better double check that, because I'll tell you right now, if you lose that refinery, the only thing that's going to change, imported products with no EPA regulations are going to get shipped in here. Now, I'm sorry you don't want it in your backyard, but like I said, we need a better job of monitoring and getting that refinery back. And it's not 1,000 jobs. It's probably 37,000 jobs, if not more, 40,000 jobs. I can tell you right now, it's pretty hard for me, what I've been doing over the last month, when I got to answer those phone calls, when my members are calling me up and saying, I'm losing my house, I got nothing going on. And I sent about 115 guys around the country, Pittsburgh and everywhere else, to look for work. So give me 37,000 jobs, good paying jobs in this area. You want to talk about worse pollution? Better double check. I don't think it's going to be that refinery. There's other places in Philadelphia that's worse than that.
Thank you, Mr. Bland. The next speaker is O.
So I choose to believe that we really are at a pivotal point of power. This is an opportunity for Philadelphia to live into who it really is. Instead of a city that's infested with violence, gun violence, drug addiction, opioids, this truly is our pivotal point of power, of opportunity for us to figure out how to work across lines. We are visionarians. We have the ability to imagine a future we haven't even thought of yet. The youth in our community are brilliant. They have not been tapped. Economic benefits, I care about our brothers. I truly care about our men. My father was a man. I care about men. And economic benefits, asbestos. Economic benefits, talcum powder. Economic benefits, DDT. Economic benefits, cigarettes. These are all things that our scientists approved at one point in time under economic benefits. And now we're at court and litigating. So again, I choose to believe that this is an opportunity for us to recognize that our scientists many times are very limited in understanding what we need in order to have a healthy planet, healthy families. Again, I'm pointing at the opioid addiction in Philadelphia, the violence in Philadelphia. We need to figure out how to create an economy that raises everyone, black and white. And the environment that we are creating at this point in time is not healthy for anyone. Yes, it may fill your pockets. It may do that. But the bottom line is we need a planet that has healthy air. Again, I choose to believe that we really are at a pivotal point of power. It's an opportunity to work across lines and really tap into our high schools and our universities in saying we can do better.
Great. Thank you. Charles Reeves.
While I get here. Okay. First, I'm going to thank Ms. Russell, because you know I love you. Right? You've been strong in our community forever. And Mr. Bullock, I ain't forgetting about you neither. But as I sit here, I think I lived in Tasker, which is Grace Ferry, for 61 years. I buried over 500 people from cancer, right? So as we sit here and we discuss, first, let me go back. People from Tasker and from Wilson should be up there. We buried our families. All our families died. That's just one point. But as I sit here and I think about the workers, right, and I think about that we never was employed there. None of my friends went there. None of my friends worked there. But that's another thing. That's another phase. As your board come together, right, you have to reach us. My father fought this fight in the 70s, right? And y'all told him he's all right. You said it was all right. It wasn't bad. Now we find out it was a lie. We was dying. I remember the ground shaking when I was young from that refinery, right? We don't want the refinery. We don't want you to build it over. We don't want you to fix it up. We want you to get rid of it, right? Or even move us. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Clancy, did you sign both this and sign up online? I just have another Mark Clancy. I just want to make sure that we are, all right, good. That's great. I just wanted to be sure. And then, I'm going to apologize because I am not going to do well with this name. I believe it's Sonia Ailhins. Did I butcher it badly? I'm so sorry.
Hi, my name is Sanija Aikens. I'm actually another Jersey resident, but most of my family is from Philly. And I am a part of Philly Thrive, and I have a lot of concerns about the impact and more concerned about the youth because we should also have a voice too. It doesn't just affect adults, it affects us too. So my uncle was actually Mr. Charles Reeves. He's my uncle. He just came up here. He's one of the leaders in our community too. So I also felt that he should have been up there too because he does a lot for Grace Ferry. And like I'm more concerned about the people who live around Grace Ferry because they're extremely close to the refinery. And I'm sorry. A lot of the people you see wearing these yellow shirts, they also live very close to the refinery and they're very concerned. They don't want the refinery. Yes, a lot of people lost their jobs, but are you really going to put jobs over people's health, over people dying from asthma, cancer? I'm sorry. Most people who live in Stinger Square, they are of older age. They've been there for a while. And they're not going away either. So you might want to kind of listen to what they're going to have to say because they're going to be here and they're going to stand up for what they believe. I'm sorry, I'm going to tell it like it is. Like we were chanting outside, we do have the right to breathe, and we do strongly believe in that. And if you think building another refinery is going to help that at all, you're extremely mistaken. And I'm also concerned about the land itself. The land is extremely contaminated, and we can clean and clean and clean all at once, but it's never going to be fully clean. That's going to be contaminated, especially the air. It's never going to be the same. And like a lot of speakers said, there has to be more community leaders up there. Like I'm looking at all the all the names under it, like all the companies. There's more government up there than community. And I'm also seeing like the different ethnicities, and I work for Miss Irene too. I work at the park, so I already know her. So there's more suits and ties than more community. And I really feel like we should put more people up there, especially more people who were directly affected. Like I've been listening for weeks about people waking up or seeing orange or being thrown from their beds, but you don't hear none of those stories because either they're too afraid to come up or they're not on that panel. They can't tell you their experiences. So maybe if you put more up there, you can understand more about what the people around here are feeling and what they want more. instead of just having a microphone up here where they can only get 3 minutes to talk. So I'm going to wrap it up because I do only have 3 minutes to talk, but I was hoping you can take into consideration the residents and what things you can put on the land that's going to be healthy, if there's any things at all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Elijah. I think we have gotten through everyone who has signed up. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak that didn't have a chance to?
Hello, everyone. My name is Carol White. I'm on a fence line community over in Wilson Park. I'm at an arm reach from the refinery. And I heard someone mention earlier that no one was actually affected by the explosion. Well, I was. I never had cancer before in my life I never had asthma. When that first explosion happened, I couldn't breathe. And I ran to the emergency room, and they had to give me 3 asthma treatments with 2 different pumps. Never in my life I ever had asthma before. Now I do. I've been out in Wilson Park for 16 years. I've been on the board of Philly Thrive, and I've been in the Philly Thrive for almost 3.5 years. And this group that we have here is more considerate than to be selfish. We're not a selfish group. We actually get a chance to go door to door. And we do surveys. We do monitoring people that we be around. I lived there in Wilson Park, and I noticed that on one block that I lived there, almost like, I can say, these 12 people died on one block. My seniors in the high-rise right here across the street, they had to kick in their doors and found them dead from respiratory failure or some type of stroke or heart attack, when their families couldn't check in on them. But when the refinery blows that air and the explosions, their air is up there, and anybody from the 10th floor up is getting the most of it. They're getting the direct poison. Another thing I like to say is the panel is great to have a panel, but do anybody live right across the street from a refinery? Anybody? I mean, close that you can say that, you can recognize and feel what I'm feeling. My mother passed from cancer a year ago. I'm still not feeling that, and like she said before, we need more people up there that at least ask questions about who can be affected the most, and it's us. Remind me of Flint and Detroit. The same thing can happen there, can happen here in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ann Dixon. I live in West Philly. My question for the panel is there a time frame for when a decision is going to be made about this site? I'd like to echo a lot of things people have already said. Mark Clinty first brought up the composition of the panel is a lot left to be desired. I want to echo what Audrey Wolf said about our climate crisis. There are floods all over the world. There are water crises all over the world. The Arctic Circle is burning. This has been the hottest July on record. This is a climate crisis. No matter how much we want to save the refinery, if we want to make this a habitable planet for humans, we cannot do that. We don't have a choice. And I want to thank Philly Thrive for doing lots of hard work and leading on this issue. Thank you very much. And I want to echo what Corinne Walk mentioned is about who is going to pay for this remediation. So for decades, Sunoco has been giving neighbors cancer. It doesn't matter, we'll just ignore it. They've been getting fine after fine after fine. We might pay it, we might not pay it. Doesn't really matter, the city isn't going to make us do anything really. And I want Sunoco executives to pay. I want the pensions that are owed the layoffed workers be paid. all the people who have owned Sunoco to be brought back and made to be paid. I want Phil Rinaldi to sell some of his boats so that the site can be remediated. You know, executives have names and addresses and assets, and I know that's not going to happen given the record of what's happened in the city and how supported the fossil fuel industry has been, but that's what should happen. They should pay.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Virginia Harris. I live here in South Philadelphia, and I've lived here for about 8 years. I've been in Philadelphia much longer than that, and I really love South Philadelphia. I think it's a really unique community. It has diversity economically, ethnically, by race, by age. It has it all. It is the best neighborhood in Philadelphia, except for the air pollution. Except for the air pollution. The refinery is on Point Breeze. Point Breeze is called Point Breeze because there is a river wind, and when the refinery was open, you would see that plume of wind, that erupting volcano pouring over a neighborhood full of children. One of the most densely populated neighborhoods of children in all of Philadelphia were living with that smoke, and I thank God that it's not operating right now. I founded an organization because we've had so much tragedy resulting from asthma in our children. But asthma is not the only consequence that we're facing from that air pollution. It's cancer, it's heart disease. We have, we're called the Meds and Eds Center of the world. A big part of the reason we have so much medical here is because we have so much pollution here. We're feeding these hospitals on a nonstop basis. And I founded an organization called Asthma Rangers to help train our children to survive in this pollution, because collectively we don't seem to have the will to stop it. Children are the most vulnerable to air pollution because anatomically their respiratory tract is so tiny that just a tiny amount of air pollution compared to what it would take to bring an adult into a respiratory attack will bring a child into a respiratory attack. And in fact, Philadelphia has one of the highest rates of asthma in the entire world, children's asthma. It has the highest child mortality rate in the United States. Philadelphia, this beautiful city, and it's all related to the air pollution. When asthma strikes a child, it generally strikes them very young, which means that from the beginning of their education, they are not on an equal playing field with anybody else. Children who have asthma miss a tremendous amount of school, and as a result, a child with asthma is less likely to read by 3rd grade, is less likely to graduate from high school, is more likely to commit suicide, suffers from anxiety, depression, and obesity. All of these things come with the term asthma, along with the terrifying asthma attacks. And literally, we take 50 kids a day in Philadelphia to the hospital in an ambulance. We need to wake up. All of you folks need to wake up. This is your opportunity to step up. Protect our children.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
How you doing? My name is Clyde McCoy. I've been living in South Philly for all my life. I moved to Los Angeles, but I came back. I just want to thank the first responders for everything that they did that night, because it scared the hell out of me. Because I was driving and it scared the heck out of me. My concern is this. I did a little bit of research. NAACP did a study a couple years ago. And that refinery contributes to 72% of the toxic air in this city. 72%. So do we even care about children anymore? See, all grown folks up here. I applaud that young lady that came up and spoke. Need more children up here. Get out of your pockets and stop trying to make money and look after these kids. Because believe me, this air that you breathing, they're going to be taking care of you. What's going to be your answer to them? What's going to be your answer to them? If you live in this city and that thing is operating, that air is going all over the place. Trust me on that. The history of this place, since the 1900s, been fires there. 1931, 1932, 1944, 1960, 1964, 1970, 1975, 1988, 1990, and 2009. How many more fires do we need for all of South Philly is this extinct?
Thank you. Great. Are there...
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sylvia Bennett, and I'm from South Philadelphia. I just wanted to say thank you all for taking the time to listen to us. But we're living amongst a silent killer. Does anyone care? Police run up and down the street locking people up for everything that goes wrong. This is a silent killer. It's killing my daughters. They have cancer. My grandchildren have asthma. I left my daughter today in the hospital crying. There's no medication can help her. Somebody has to care. You let the billionaires run in here and run out, and we suffer with breathing this toxin air. Enough is enough. It's common sense. God gave us free, fresh air, not dirty air and dirty water. What are we doing to each other? We're sitting around listening, complaining, but nobody's doing anything. Enough is enough. People are dying. This place is a silent killer. I cry for the people that need a job. Get a better job. One man told us, who cares about cancer? I have cancer. He's a worker for 25, 30 years. He said at 5th and Chunk, I don't care about that. My mother and father died. I need my job. So what we had cancer? But I need my job. I need my children. My daughter's dying. Okay? This is common sense. It's no brainer. God gave us common sense. We need to use it. Clean this mess up out here. It's a trap. It's a killer trap. And we talk about drugs. We talk about stealing, people doing this and that. This is a silent killer.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Rosa. I'm here with Socialist Alternative. I live in Grays Ferry, and I see the air pollution from the refinery every day. We need to address transition to renewables for South Philadelphia and all of Philadelphia. We need to work with community members around South Philly as well as PES refinery workers to come to a solution that benefits both of these groups. This panel right here is trying to tear these two groups apart from each other. We have more interests in common than we have with anyone who's sitting on this panel right now. The PES refinery plant needs to be permanently shut down because of the health problems it is causing for South Philly residents and refinery workers. We need health experts who are not connected to the refinery complete an in-depth survey of the land and determine if people even can live there or close to it. We don't even know how much this is affecting the people around us. It's still polluting the land and water and air all around it. It's not been cleaned up. As of now, the plant is some of the soil needs to be stored in safe facilities away from people where they can be kept without contaminating people. Sunoco needs to pay for the site where the plant lies to be cleaned up, so it can be used to build public housing to house the thousands of homeless people in our city and the descendants of the people that have been displaced after the refinery was built. We need to demand that all refinery workers are given new jobs in green energy, and those that do not want to work in green energy should be given a full pension and allowed to retire right now. Philly needs to massively invest in solar and wind energy. We have a tremendous capacity to use alternative energies. We as Philadelphians need to decide what to do with this facility, not Sunoco, not the people on this panel, not the people in City Hall. It's us who need to decide.
Thank you. We're over time, so if I think we're going to end after the last person in line. Again, I want to make it clear that this is not the only opportunity for folks to have to speak. We're not going anywhere, and I am going to address a couple of the comments that were made that I think y'all deserve an answer tonight on kind of what our next steps are. So, sir.
So my name is Chuck. I live in North Philly. I'm a union member. And I feel like in the last couple months, Philadelphia's which it should be said, of the top 10 largest cities in the country is the poorest. And in that context, good paying union jobs are not something to scoff at. And in the last 2 months, we've had Hahnemann close, thousands of good paying union jobs. This refinery closing, thousands of good paying union jobs. That affects all of us. And it's not just, bad for those workers, it's bad for everyone. And frankly, we haven't really seen anything from the politicians, from the mayor's office, from the governor's office, to step in and do anything about this. We've seen sort of half-hearted statements and, hand-wringing, saying they can't do anything, there's nothing to be done. But there is plenty to be done. Frankly, Hahnemann should have been taken under public ownership and taken under state control and kept open because it's a vital resource for the city. As for this refinery, people, I want a job. I also want a planet to live on. It can seem like those two things are in conflict at times, but I don't think they actually are. The right time for a Green New Deal was 20 years ago. Second best time is now. The gentleman from the Boilermakers asked where we're going to get 37,000 jobs. It's not going to come from this committee. It's not going to come from business interests. It's going to come from massive public investment in infrastructure, in green jobs. It's not about taking union jobs and replacing them with, pardon the language, but shitty minimum wage non-union jobs. It's about replacing them and taking those skills that union members already have and utilizing them in a different way. We need that investment now, and it shouldn't be working people who are already taxed enough paying for it. It should be these big corporations that the mayor's office and the governor's office are happy to give tax breaks to, happy to let go. Comcast pays nothing in taxes. They just built that second, new skyscraper. They're paying no taxes on it. They got to pay. Sunoco has to pay. The guy who bought Hahnemann and ran it in the ground, I don't know where he is, but find him, bring him back in handcuffs if need be, and make him pay. Save the jobs, save the planet. It's possible. Just need people to actually step up to the plate.
Okay. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan. Committee, thank you. Brian, welcome to your career-defining project, right? I hope you take this job seriously. So these questions are supposed to be about this topic of this meeting, which is community involvement. 4 meetings is not enough. It's not even a third enough, right? You're going to make a decision in the fall. There's no date given. I know that these answers are going to be published online, so I'm going to ask you direct questions so that they will appear. We have a reporter here, I assume, is writing all these questions down, and these answers will appear. We want to know the date the decision is going to be made by. We want to know how the decision is going to be made, who the decision is going to be made by. We want to know the power that the advisory committee has in influencing the decision. Want to know if it's a single person, such as the mayor or a committee. Want to know if the committee is odd or even. Want to know if it's a vote. Want to know if it's a percentage vote or if it should be a percentage vote. There's a lot of really good, hard questions that are direct and low-hanging fruit that need to be answered on that website. The composition of this advisory panel is 10% correct, maybe, right? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Sustainability is about the triple bottom line. The oil and gas company is about a single bottom line. You have an inherent conflict right there. I love this comment about this refinery being a straight, cold stone killer. You're losing lives that matter. It cannot be underscored enough. That's why I'm on record. I have a ton of other questions. It cannot be underscored enough. We have a sustainability plan. The Office of Sustainability is not here. We do not have an environmental justice expert on the panel. You don't have a remediation expert on the panel. You don't have community members on the panel. I also want to know what the outreach was done for this meeting. This is pretty good, but in my opinion, there should be like 1,000 people here. Okay? I know the Office of Emergency Management has a text update because I get them all the time. I got my text update about this massive fireball that shook the door of our house such that my wife thought someone was trying to kick the door in. I got that text at 12:30 p.m. lunchtime the next day. Explosion happened at 4 a.m. You said all is good. You said air quality is okay. There's black smoke. There's volatile organic compounds in that ground. There's a flashpoint of dangerous and toxic substances there. There's a legacy of death and pollution there. Butane, propane, burns clean. The smoke is black. The text did not come out until 12:30. Office of Emergency Management should have sent that out instantaneously, whether you deemed it safe or not. It should have happened immediately. That is a failure. That's a failure. It's a failure. So I will be back. I will ask you challenging questions. I hope you rise to the challenge. Philadelphia is a birthplace of democracy. We have Office of Sustainability. We have a goal of being the greenest city in America, right? We have a beautiful Green City Clean Waters plan. We have a lot of innovation here. Oil and gas is not innovative. They do not care. They have subcontractors and companies that will tie this up in litigation forever. They do not care about the community. You need to engage these people, and you need to send out text alerts, and you need to flyer, and you need to send out phone calls and robocalls. You need to alert every community member in here to invite the entire constituency, and then you need to break up into small conversational panels where you give feedback, and they have the opportunity to ask questions and get direct feedback, right? You can put one of each one of your subcommittees in those smaller panels. It needs to happen in a better way, and there needs to be more meetings.
Great, thank you.
Thanks. My name's Mitch Chen, and I live in Northeast Philly. I'm a member of 350 Philly and also of Power. I want to echo the concerns people have raised about both the composition of the committee and also the process. I agree that there needs to be far more representation from fence line community members and a more participatory process for engaging with these questions. I wanted to share a couple of data points that lead to questions that I think should be addressed and that come out of the presentation that was given previously. And I want to echo the idea that the mandate of this committee should be expanded, or that this conversation is raising up a need for additional task forces and committees to do essential planning for the city of Philadelphia in the coming months. I think we need a Green New Deal committee to take up questions that are coming out of this conversation and that might be beyond the scope of what this particular committee can do. I want to say that I think that we really need to think much more creatively and boldly about what powers the city of Philadelphia has. The initial presentation was talking about all of the limits of how Philadelphia city government can influence the outcome of this decision. One issue that was raised was about air permitting. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled a couple of years ago that the Environmental Rights Amendment, which guarantees the right to clean air to all Pennsylvanians, was not being upheld by existing legislation, statutes, and court decisions over the last 40 years. It's clear to me, based on what we heard today and in many other meetings that I've attended, that the way that Air Management Services is regulating air pollution in Philadelphia does not work to protect public health sufficiently, or else these stories would not have been told. And so going forward, I think that this committee should look very seriously at how the air code can be changed to prohibit harmful uses and to actually protect public health in the way that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court said we must do, but are not doing. I also think that the So there's an ethical question about whether we should have a refinery in Philadelphia because it's a contributor to greenhouse gases. That's essential. Also, from a business planning perspective, I think we need to think much more seriously about the urgency of the climate crisis in two ways. I want to echo the concern about the potential inundation of this site. Sea level rise may happen much more quickly than we expect it to. Pretty much every study I've seen in the past year basically says things are worse than we thought they were going to be. And that would be devastating to have whatever is in that soil flooding out into the city. Secondly, along the same lines, I was just reading a report about the likely impact of climate mitigation measures on the oil refining industry. The oil refining industry must contract dramatically in the next 10 to 20 years and start to go away, or else there's zero chance that we will meet our target of limiting global warming to less than 2 degrees. It will happen if we're serious about climate change. So betting on a future that includes oil refining in the city of Philadelphia is betting against a livable climate and against the local, state, and federal policies that are necessary to protect us from climate catastrophe.
Great. Sir, I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
The one last thing I want to say is just echoing the concerns about the future of the workers, their pensions, and the future of jobs in the city of Philadelphia. I really think we need a Green New Deal Commission. I'm looking at what's happening in New Jersey. There's an entire new renewable energy industry being born right across the river with thousands of jobs that will be created. They have a memo of understanding with the South Jersey Building Trades Council to build offshore wind turbines. We need to talk really much more seriously about how we can have a labor and community-led transition to renewable energy and how that can benefit Philadelphia, and that should really begin right now.
Great. Thank you.
So thank you.
So I do know that we had said that he was going to be the last speaker. I believe you two do have something to say. I'm going to ask you all to keep it really, really brief, but I do want to make sure you all have an opportunity to speak.
Okay, good evening. And I'd like to thank everyone in the panel for having this meeting. My name is Joseph Rose. I'm the new committee man for the 33rd Division of the 36th Ward. I live at 31st and Tasker. I've been living in South Philly for 58 years. I've seen that refinery night after night after night, some type of light, some type of smoke, some type of action going over there that causes our attention. We've been suffering for years over there, decades. My mother, my father, my grandmother, they've been fighting this refinery for years. And all I've been told it was a money-making thing and nothing could be done. Something can be done. I'd like to see more people on the panel, like people said, from the neighborhood. We live in South Philly, so we breathe that stuff every day. I would like to see some more community leaders, pastors, and better communication with the residents of South Philly, period. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jamie Gaudier. I'm the Democratic nominee for the 3rd District City Council seat. Thank you. I was mostly here to listen tonight, and I'm glad that I took that opportunity. I've been so inspired by everything that I've heard from everyone that has gotten up to speak. Such intelligent comments, such hopeful comments, such exciting comments about what the future of this site could be. And so I want to encourage, I see so many of my past trusted colleagues on the panel and so many of my future colleagues on the panel. I want to encourage you to really take the advice that was given time and again about having more community representation on this panel. Think about how much we benefited tonight from hearing people's comments. I think this process can only benefit more from true, authentic, respectful citizen engagement. Second, I noticed the slide earlier, or one of the slides earlier, that talked about really needing to know about PES's intentions in determining what the future of the site is going to be. I'm not entirely clear about sort of the dealings with PES, but I really think that we need some transparency in what they intend to do, and I actually think that they owe us that as a city. So I encourage us to figure out how to get more answers about their intentions with this site as we move forward with this process. And then lastly, I encourage us not to cede our power. This is our city. This is our city. And our residents are speaking loudly and clearly about wanting to see a green future and wanting to live in healthy neighborhoods. And we should use this as an opportunity. We narrowly escaped disaster with the 2 explosions at the refinery. And now, we've been blessed with this wonderful opportunity to reimagine this site and to turn it into a place that is better and that could be a hub for green, renewable energy and green jobs. So I hope that we take this opportunity. I plan to be a part of the process moving forward, and I look forward to working with all of you come January in a formal way to build a greener future for our city. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. So, as we close out tonight, I do just want to hit on a couple of quick things that I think folks deserve to hear tonight, because there were some very common threads that came up tonight. First, I do want to hit on the report that I referenced earlier for the fall. I'm not going to be able to give you a solid date that it's going to happen on X date. I also don't want it to be, I want to be clear that this isn't going to be a report that has a decision. Again, I think we believe that we have some limited authority and some influence over what happens to PES, but I don't want anyone to leave the room to say that this report or this committee or the city is going to dictate exactly what happens at PES. We do think we have some significant influence, and we hope to use that influence. The report is going to synthesize the information that all of you provide back to us. It will help understand and clarify what that information is, and we'll make some recommendations. And those recommendations may very well be additional committees going forward or additional recommendations or work that the city needs to do. So I did want to make that clear, because I don't want folks to leave here with an expectation that come fall, there's going to be a decision from the city that X happens. I'm not sure that that's not going to be what this report looks like. I also do want to say I appreciate the comments on the makeup of this committee and the need and desire for additional community input and support on the advisory group itself. We're going to take that information back, and we're going to take and may make adjustments as we go forward, and very much appreciate those comments and the spirit in which those comments were given. And finally, the comments around how we are engaging in these meetings going forward is one that we have talked about internally to some length. This is an initial meeting. This was a format created in large part to get the initial conversation going, but there is recognition that additional engagement, conversation, and dialogue needs to happen. I can't sit here tonight and tell you exactly what that dialogue or facilitation may look like, and quite frankly, it may look different in each committee, but we do recognize that that facilitation needs to happen and there needs to be ongoing dialogue. And finally, your comments around additional outreach are well taken, and we're committed to making sure that we do a better job going forward to make sure that outreach happens in the community. So again, I do want to say thank you for all of you who came tonight. This is an important issue. This is one of the most pressing issues that Philadelphia is facing over the next several years. And clearly there are strong feelings on all sides of this issue. To many, this isn't mutually exclusive, and I think that is one of the challenges that the folks here and the city are facing, is how do we make sure that we protect our working men and women, but at the same time review public safety and public health going forward. And that is the career that I have chosen, is to make those difficult decisions, and we're looking forward to ongoing dialogue. So thank you all again.